Here is a force, the National Security Guard, which is only training for such kind of operations. So we have equipped for that. We have tactics for that. We have devised new method, and we have thought of every kind of eventualities which are possible in an urban area.
In JNK, the information is available, but one has to sort out that information, because most of the information, it is what sometimes we call information overload.
And ISIS succeeded in sort of going down a level, but they were more frequent. Like they weren't looking to take down the Twin Towers, but they did things like the London bombings, the Mumbai attacks, the motivating things like Mumbai, Madrid, Toronto.
There are open fundraising ads on jihadist websites for, say it's something like for 100 dinars, you sponsor 8 mortar rounds, or for 50 dinars, sponsor 150 bullets. These kind of ads.
US NSA was informed. The president was briefed on 6th of August, and he was told that maybe terrorists are planning to hijack planes and use them for some kind of terrorist attacks.
There's sort of a joke in United States intelligence that always is like hindsight makes journalists the best intelligence officers in the world.
In Bombay, also information was available, Bombay attack, in bits and pieces, of course not very clearly. Again, it was not so seriously taken.
It is actually information overload, which is distracting the counter-terrorism task force.
Cooperation of various intelligence agencies which are involved in collecting different kind of intelligence. Satellite imagery is one, social media intelligence is another, internet is being surveillanced by somebody else, all human entered by some third organization. All these have to come into one coordinated point. Only then can you derive out a good intelligence.
But for us, it is a very short period of time. Time is the most premium thing for us. Terrorist strike takes place anywhere in India. We have to react in minimum time frame and neutralize the terrorists, save the people.
General Joshi, I would like to briefly, could you tell us how terrorism has changed since 1945 till 2020?
Yeah, certainly. But before I do that, I would just give out in very short form what is terrorism, what is the definition, and how it has evolved over the years, not from 1945, even before that. Coming on to the definition, various definitions are there of terrorism, but one of the most accepted ones are the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate the civil population or government or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives is what is defined as terrorism. Coming on to the types of terrorism, normally it is said that there are 5 types of terrorism. One, to start with, is religious terrorism, ideological terrorism, regional and national terrorism, racial terrorism, and last but not the least, which is we are facing today, is international terrorism. Coming on to the types or waves of terrorism, as you asked. Well, the pundits describe the terrorism in recent past from 1880 onwards, 1850 onwards, as in 5 waves. 1880 being the first wave when it started in Russia by Narodne Volya. It's a term called Narodne Volya, the people's will, meaning the people's will, where the educated class of Russia started killing czars and their sympathizers. They wanted to come out of this czar rulers. Second wave, we can say, in 1920 started after post World War One. The third wave, we can say, is in 1960 onwards, which was riding on the oppression or the perceived oppression by powers, Western powers, again in places like Vietnam and such like countries. In this, mostly America was targeted, where a lot of plane hijacking, embassy attacks, kidnappings were done. So much so, period between 1970 to 1979, in about 9 years, 10 years, it witnessed 112 hijackings of planes only in USA itself. The fourth wave, we can say, was 1990 onwards, which was a birth of religious terrorism when Al Qaeda, ISIS, all these people came into these kind of things, where the tactics also changed. It became suicide bombing, martyrdom, and fanaticism was the idea. And now, what we are today witnessing in the recent past, we are witnessing the fifth wave, which we can say is a right-wing extremism, which has taken entire world in its ambit. And the aim here is to start the civil war. They are right-wing extremist people. They are radicalized, and they only want anti-government, anti-law enforcement agencies they want to fight with. Their tactics is mass movement, non-cooperation with the government, and things like that. You see, there has been a 320% increase in violence in last 5 years. So this is how you see the terrorism has come out, and this is where we are today. In this year, 2018, there were 32,836 people killed in one single year. Average from 2006 to 2020, 15,000 people have been killed annually by terrorists.
Thank you, General Joshi. I think you summarized the entire history of terrorism now very swiftly. Moving on to Crosston, we are going to go on a larger framework. 9/11 changed the dynamics from great power rivalry to the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism was the fundamental basis of US national security from 9/11 again until 2020. Has it been replaced by the China threat?
Well, there's an aspect of being yes and no to that question, in the sense that we have definitely, in the United States, without doubt, there's almost been a global war on terror fatigue that we can see, for the diplomatically speaking, for the last, honestly, really, probably for the last decade, probably the first decade, 2001 to 2011, 2010, it was all in, all hands on deck. Everyone was very motivated. But then after that, ISIS sort of sapped the strength, because ISIS brought it back to the old school understanding of terrorism, where it was much easier for Americans to focus on Al Qaeda when Al Qaeda and the like were talking in terms of answering that global war. We actually enjoyed it better, I think, because this sort of gets me in trouble in DC circles a lot, in Washington. But I think we were actually more comfortable with terrorists trying to get up to the level of the Soviets. Like, this is an ideological global warfare, and we're like very happy again. We're very happy. We have this global enemy that we can face. And ISIS succeeded in sort of going down a level, but they were more frequent. Like, they weren't looking to take down the Twin Towers, but they did things like the London bombings, the Mumbai attacks, the motivating things like Mumbai, Madrid, Toronto, driving vans into crowds of people. this was a much smaller level of terrorist act compared to hijacking planes and taking down skyscrapers in New York City or the Pentagon. But it also made Americans sort of push it off of their radar screen again. They're like, oh, okay, terrorism is now back on a lower level. It's not the same thing. And unlike, unfortunately, all the cities I just named and the threats that India faces, for example, the United States has not faced those smaller sessions as much. We had that one nightclub shooting, if you remember, that was ISIS motivated in Orlando, Florida, in which so many people were killed. But there was that secondary aspect to the nightclub shooting because it was a gay club, if people remember that. And that made, again, it made Americans say, well, that's a tragedy, but those people are different from us, so it doesn't affect me, kind of thing. As for it being, so we have this example where people are not thinking about terrorism the way they did over the last 20 years in the United States. They've once again, they've been far enough removed from 9/11 to think 9/11 is not going to happen to us. A repeat of 9/11 will not happen. And that always puts America in a precarious position. Whether or not that's been replaced by the China threat, I still consider that no, simply because the dynamics are so different of how we interpret the threat. The threat of terrorism is pretty absolute in the minds of America, and the kind of threat China represents is a very sort of emotionally conflicted threat for Americans. China is so dominant in the global economy and how it connects to American debt, and how China reflects its potential threat measures is very different from what we've seen in, say, Middle East/Arab terrorism. So I think it's dwindling. The emphasis on terrorism is dwindling in the minds of Americans, but it hasn't been completely just subsumed by this perception of, well, the Chinese threat is as bad as 9/11 was. I don't think Americans are there.
Let me add to that. I think because of the pandemic and there is no interconnectedness, there's transportation systems are broken down. You can't travel. Maybe the terrorist threat has gone down. We also need some, planes and buses and trains and ships to travel. So we'll have to see what happens after, maybe once the vaccine comes out. These people might, blow out again. They might blow the balloon out. So it's too early, as you mentioned, whether it's China or whether it's terrorism. We still have to wait and see. Everyone needs money. So do terrorists also needs money. Vipul, let me come back to you about the terrorist financing. It's a very important topic as far as international organizations and FATF goes. Now, people who are participating on our discussion on the webinar would like to know a moot question, which is not reflected in the media. That is, how do terrorist organizations like Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jamaat-ul Dawa generate funds for their activities, maybe in India, in South Asia, or worldwide? You can add some examples from the ISIS also.
Yeah, so Mangesh, basically not only Lashkar-e-Toiba or Jamaat-ul Dawa, but also Al-Qaeda, like Dr. Crosston covered, ISIS, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, you name we've got them. And so everybody is actually interlinked, in terms of sources of, their funding. So talking about ISIS, right? So we just covered it. They are the wealthiest terrorist groups of all times. Now, like how Dr. Crosston said, they have raised the bar towards the terrorism and the activities about it so high. And, so they are the wealthiest terrorist groups of all times. And so basically selling crude oil at average of $3 million per day, right? Selling historical relics, parts of monuments and all of that. So they are minting money, right? Also, in some countries, in Middle Eastern, countries, like how Dr. Major General Joshi was saying, it's been radical, religious type of wave, and so basically there, there are open fundraising ads on jihadist websites for, say it's something like for 100 dinars. You sponsor 8 mortar rounds, or for 50 dinars sponsor 150 bullets, these kind of ads. And raising entities operate openly to fund terrorist cells abroad despite of government concerns of international exposure, imbalance in and imbalance in domestic constituency. In short, in exchange of peace at home, they allow these activities for funding groups abroad, right? Say Saleh Babar of World Assembly of Muslim Youth, he gave a statement to US Journeyman TV that the governments of these nations know all these things, they know the methods, they know where all these things are happening, but they cannot do it under the radicalism of the source, right? So, for example, in Saudi, the Al Harmian raises $200 million per year to build mosques and help Muslims around the world by movements of funds via charity. So that's the charity part of it. But also it has come into picture. There are been accusations. They have funded Al Qaeda by research done by Washington Institute, that they have funded Jamal Islamia for terrorist activities in Southeast Asia. So so all these things are there, and there has to be a synchronized efforts, not only by the Western countries, or by India, or by the countries inside the FATF, FATF ruled governance, or the FSRBs, but also countries in the Middle East. They have to tighten their hold over all these activities very strategically. Yeah, over to you.
Let me add to it. Terrorists are also collecting money through taxes, through organized crime. What is going on in Europe? Immigration from North Africa and Africa, people are going. So each one is paying around $10,000. So they collect from there. North Africa, again, the Sahel region, which is what do you call the Morocco and the upper Libya. When terrorists are, the migrants are passing, they're collecting taxes at local checkpoints. So that's another area of tax collection. So the thing has gone like, it's a very an organized business, although we might call it another unorganized sector. Coming back to Sandeep, this is an interesting question. Till 9/11, counter-terrorist operations were taking against terrorist camps, and these terrorist camps are usually located, somewhere in the desert, somewhere in the jungles. You have seen FARC in Colombia, then you have seen certain insurgent groups in South America, or let's say somewhere in Lebanon or somewhere in Libya. But 9/11 changed everything. 9/11 brought an element of urban warfare, where counterterrorism operations started taking in urban areas. We have seen examples in the last 18 years. We have seen Kabul, we have seen Basra, we have seen Baghdad. You are an expert to answer this question. What are the challenges for counterterrorism operations in urban areas, especially in areas like India, like where you operated, which is a very crowded area in the south of Bombay? What are the difficulties did you face?
See, look, I don't feel it is a challenge actually, and it is a difficulty, because here is a force, the National Security Guard, which is only training for such kind of operations. So we have equipped for that, we have tactics for that, we have devised new method, and we have thought of every kind of eventualities which are possible in an urban area. So we are fully equipped and trained for that. It is not a challenge. It can be a challenge for a force which is not trained for that. If you put a regular army unit, or a police force who's trained in law and order enforcement and other things, they cannot take this chance. But we are specialized in fighting inside the building, in cross congested area, where in the small room. So it is not a challenge for us. We are trained for that, and we can take on anytime anybody comes in.
That's a very assuring answer. Everyone is safe.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you very much, sir. General Joshi, in what way terrorist tactics and strategies have changed over time? Could you add some examples to it by giving live examples?
Certainly, you see, the insurgency I have fought in Northeast, in Sri Lanka, Kashmir, and all these places, and a very long period. When based on the country, based on the group which you are operating against, the strategy, the tactics changes. The way of fighting terror is totally different in Northeast from that what is in J&K. Now, coming on to specific example of fighting terrorism in J&K. In J&K, the information is available, but one has to sort out that information, because most of the information, it is what sometimes we call information overload. They also pass on false information so as to hide the actual information what is there. Very often you will get the information that house is so and so. There are once you reach there, you will find there are 3 people of that name in that very vicinity or in that very area. These are the different kind of issues which are on ground available. Coming on to the higher aspect or the strategical aspect of fighting terrorism in various parts. You see, one has to have develop information based on surveillance, social media, internet. Today, these are the things where information is flowing. Do we have that kind of will to do that? Do we have the equipment? Do we have the expertise? That is an aspect. Second point is the cooperation of various intelligence agencies which are involved in collecting different kind of intelligence. Satellite imagery is one, social media intelligence is another, internet is being surveillanced by somebody else, all human entered by some third organization. All these have to come into one coordinated point. Only then can you derive out a good intelligence which is clear cut and action worthy.
Yeah, and let me add, I think terrorist strategy are changing. 9/11, we saw the entire 2 towers coming down, and the local area also, a couple of, I think, 11 or 12 buildings were destroyed. But 26/11 was a different ball game. It all boiled down to decentralization. They were all carrying AK-47s and grenades. There was no plane which was flying into Taj Hotel or Oberoi Hotel. So I think it's coming down to what is easily available on the ground. AK-47 is easily available. We get it in Pakistan, for maybe $30-40. So it becomes a weapon of choice and ease to take up AK-47 and start firing in any city. It is very easy to get inside the city. It is very easy to cross the borders. It's the most widely available weapon system around the world.
Now, issue here is that when 9/11 happened,
right,
information was available.
Yes, correct.
In May, in July, and in month of August, 3 times US NSA was informed. The president was briefed on 6th of August, and he was told that maybe terrorists are planning to hijack planes and use them for some kind of terrorist attacks. Thus, it was not said that it is on Twin Towers. Neither the terrorists understood or envisaged that they will be achieving this kind of a result, that Twin Towers will collapse. It was not envisaged by the terrorists that way. And what NSA of America said, that you mean to say that they are going to use aircrafts as missiles and hit our Pentagon or some headquarters like that. So this point has to be understood by our senior people in the hierarchy, that these things, anything is possible today. Yes. Similarly, in coming to India, information of Kargil war, I'm talking about war now, not the terrorism. Information was available, but it was not accepted by seniors. In Bombay, also information was available, Bombay attack, in bits and pieces, of course, not very clearly. Again, it was not so seriously taken. So we need to understand this aspect of. Yes, Sandeep wants to say something.
So I just wanted to add on to you. It is actually information overload, which is distracting the counter-terrorism task force. There are so much of false information available in the environment. Every day you get the terrorists are planning this, terrorists are planning that, and it is very difficult to decipher which is the precise information and which is not. This is my personal experience in counterinsurgency. Every day in end reports, you will find that today's terrorists are 100% are coming, but for months and months there will be nothing. So we have to slightly, improve our system like that, okay, which is the information which is more important and which is, is given like that one.
Just real quick,
Go ahead.
there's sort of a joke in United States intelligence that always says like hindsight makes journalists the best intelligence officers in the world, because it's always like, why didn't you pay attention to that information after the event took place? Is like they know exactly where we should have paid attention to after it's happened, and because the information overload thing is right on point, because it's always trying to determine which one do you really want to act on versus the thousands of others that you don't need to act on because they're bogus.
Yeah, Vipul, coming back to you, the finance guy, could you take us to the fund availing and decimation cycle, and could you link it to the 9/11 attacks, how 9/11 attacks happened, and how the funds were transferred and decimated?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, sometime back that, actually, looking at the complexities of attacks, $300,000, it was a very small amount, right? The money came in from everywhere. There were mailboxes, addresses that were set up. There were, joint accounts that were set up. And, not that FBI, did not know what red flags were raised, because financial intelligence unit. So FINRA has put in very stringent regulations. We follow up, on our PMLA, with the guidelines that are being set by FinCEN, and Department of Treasury, they have a clear guideline, everything, right? So the banking community has everything that it needs to decipher these red flags, and uh, so the money flew in right from Saudi Arabia. There were wired amounts. UAE sent cash money, this thing, money envelopes. Germany, there were a lot of money sent for the flight trainings and for the accommodations and everything, right? Living expenses and all. And all these things would have, if the intelligence community and the banking community had a handshake in a way that trust me, they have a stipulated time of reporting these SARs, that is your suspicious activity reports, or STRs, suspicious transaction reports. But then the timeline between these events happening, the reports coming into being, and then sending it to the FIUs, these are to be well coordinated, and that is where everything went wrong. And the availing and the decimation cycle became very skewed, and this resulted into a clear loophole what the terrorists took advantage of.
Yeah, thanks, Vipul. I think that summed up that question. Sandeep, this is a question to you again. We have the operations guy. Our viewers are keen on knowing the NSG planning prior to an operation. Could you give some briefing on how the NSG team planning on 26/11, from the point of view you got an alert at your base in Manesar till the operation was over? How did the planning took place? What was going on in your mind? What was the planning? Intelligence was coming through. So could you throw a light on all the things which are happening?
See, we have to understand the difference on the special forces. Every special forces have we can't say Navy SEAL can do this and this. They can't do everything. Same way, para SF cannot do this and that. They are specialized in their own field. The Garuda, we have Garuda, the Marcos, they have their own specialization. So same way, all these other than us has a major difference. And the difference is we are a reactionary force. Others can plan their operation for months, for year, and execute it. But for us, it is a very short period of time. Time is the most premium thing for us. Terrorist strike takes place anywhere in India. We have to react in minimum time frame and neutralize the terrorists, save the people. So planning for us becomes very, very difficult because the entire force movement you are getting, that information is in the process of a movement. We are moving either by vehicle or by helicopter or by air. You can't plan a thing on air because there are you are loaded. Only the officers and the operational commanders are nearby, and in that period of time, when you are away, while you are in process of movement, the information flow is zero. Nowadays, still you have mobile phone, but who is going to provide you information? Are those people ready? So those people are not ready who are supposed to give us information. They are still under comprehension. If you take an example of 2611, the Mumbai police, which is getting the information, continuous information, the terror strike has taken place in Leopold Cafe, in that CST, they have come to Kama, there is a bomb blast in two places, there are shooting, the entire police force top hierarchy has been wiped out, and there is a two strikes in hotel. So they themselves are now in assimilating what is happening. At that time, who is going to provide? And here we are moving. So there is no one expert to give us. There was no mechanism at that time to give us information. So whatever information we are gaining through television initially, and later on it is blank. Whatever we are getting through phones and all. So to and we expect that this will happen. This will happen in future also. So our way of operation is quick planning by the commander on ground who reaches at the place. He makes a quick plan. He understands the situation. He layout of the building. What is the weapon? How much weapon the terrorists are having? How many hostages are there? And the major difference in our planning is we are not going there to kill the terrorists. It will surprise you. We are giving our main task of our force NSG is to save human life. That is the major difference between us and the other special forces. We are our bread and butter is hostage rescue. We have to save as many as people. We will kill terrorists, but that is our secondary task. So our planning is basically seeing the building, thickness of the ground, the thickness of the wall, how many windows, all this we cannot do. Uh, till the time somebody gives us a digital map, immediately a strike takes place, and it reaches it to your computer, and you can, while moving, you can make the planning. So it is a very, very dynamic operation carried out by the officers who are the leader, who are carrying out on the ground, and whatever available information they have in a minimum time frame. So it is all moving and planning and rechanging plan, and this thing is happening. So it is not a map laid on ground where you do a plan and equip yourself accordingly.
Right. As you rightly said, I think SEAL Team 6 was planning Operation Neptune Spear to kill Osama bin Laden in Motabad. They had all the layouts they were planning for last 2 to 3 months. As opposed to you, the pressure which you are going through, you're at the operation and then you have to plan. I think you did not have the blueprint of Taj also with Oberoi.
Yeah, later it came. Taj and Oberoi later it came. But who will give us a blueprint of Chabad house? Nobody knew the word how to pronounce Chabad also at that time. Nobody in the India knew there is a Jew who live. There is a place called Chabad house where the Jew live. Till the time I reach on the spot, till that time nobody knew that there are Jews. At least I didn't know. So
Right.
this kind of, and it is nobody's fault. I'm not blaming anyone for this, because this
Right.
is the situation. The R force, the NSG has to react, and we are mentally prepared for it. There is no problem. These are the challenges. These are not challenges. Again, I will say, this is the thing. Again, will come. But our planning is very, very
Correct.
dynamic. And
Right. General Joshi, intelligence failures have been happening throughout history. We have seen it since 1945. 9/11 was there, and especially in the counterterrorism in the military fields, whether it was the CIA, RAW, FBI, Mossad, all have failed sometime or the other, even though the information was coming in. A stream of terrorist attacks could have been avoided if intelligence and law enforcement agencies and government departments could have worked together in fusion. Now, in your view, with your background, what is lacking between intelligence agencies and the civilian law enforcement agencies and the military? Are they still operating in the 21st century?
You see, this very pertinent question you have asked, and almost 60% of it has been already answered by various speakers and me by myself uh, in the previous interactions. Talking about working in silos, no, we are not working in silos. All agencies are working as per their mandate and as per their aim. What you see, intelligence flows from the aim. In the center of collection is aim. Then comes the part of collection, collation, synthesis, analysis, etc. But when the aim, what aim that particular agency is looking at, that will what decide what intelligence they collect. Point comes of coordination, of course. Never will you get a clear-cut picture of very precise intelligence. This is going to happen. That they will come by this board on 26 September and they will do this. It will never happen. The analysis, the intelligence people has to be that expert, be that good that they can collect all the intelligence and then come out with a full picture what is going to happen. Main issue is that intelligence is always available in bits and pieces, but point is to synchronize that in the time frame, as what Mr. Dr. Crosston brought out earlier. It is in the time frame and not in hindsight. Most of the time it is in hindsight. We fit in all the pieces together and then say that this was to happen. Why did you not react? No, it doesn't happen that way. You get a picture that there is one boat has been taken by some people in Karachi. Now, how do you know that boat from Karachi will come to Bombay? So there is no paucity of information. Issue is coordination and people accepting it. We don't have that culture, strategic culture, the security culture, the intelligence culture is missing in our India. We don't have that. We work in our own as per our mandate, and that is where the problem is. If we ease out all this and we share information in time, everything will fall in place. And there never been an instance where there was no int available and something happened. There always been some or the other int. Issue is to join up together. We do not have to have that expertise, that analysis aspect where we join all the information together. Answer is that we should have a lead agency where all the people give information and there the full picture is formed. Human intelligence is working separate, technical is working separate, foreign intelligence is working separate, financial intelligence is working separate. When all what Vipul was saying, that the financial people also have to chip in. All these when come together, we will form a clear picture. Have I answered that?
Yes, General Joshi, you answered that. One pertinent question raised is the strategic culture. Yeah, that's what's lacking in India. I will give my example. I did an assessment around 4-5 years back of a huge refinery in Wadina. Now, this is an area which is very isolated. It's in a part of Gujarat, very near to the Pakistani border. We gave a report to the manager of the company, and he says, "Oh, no one is going to come here. There is no one miles and miles around. 360 degrees. No one's going to attack. I said, I did my work. There's a terrorist attack. If this refinery is shot, if this refinery is attacked, the supply to the entire north is going to get disrupted, and Indian economy in Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon is going to get affected. And after, let's say, 1.5 years, that refinery was on a high-value target list been released by the IB, that is the Intelligence Bureau, the Internal Intelligence Bureau. So yes, the strategic culture is lacking. Going on to the next question. Going on to the next question, Crosston. It's been 19 years since 9/11, and terrorist groups are openly operating in Pakistan, that too with state support. Now Pakistan is being on the grey list of FATF, Financial Action Task Force. So what do you think are the new policy options for President-elect Biden regarding Pakistan? Can he do something to restrict the terrorist camps, shut down the terrorist camps, or it's going to be like business as usual as happened under Bush and Obama?
I love, we go back to this already. We're always talking about under Bush and Obama. We're just skipping the last 4 years because it's sort of like an empty zone of foreign policy engagement. We have 2016 to 2020 is like just gone already in people's minds. The biggest difficulty, because Pakistan for the United States has always been for the diplomatic corps, it's very complex and very difficult. For the academic corps, Pakistan has always been a very frustrating place, quite frankly, because you can't eliminate the context in which Pakistan is in for the United States. And unfortunately, Pakistan has become a very, very deft player of manipulating that context. And in this case, the only real context that matters to Americans, to the diplomatic, military, intelligence corps of the United States government, is that neighbor to the north of Pakistan. So it's like, as long as Afghanistan seems quote unquote worse than Pakistan as far as stability, as far as terrorism, as far as branching out into greater instability in other nations, we always seem to give Pakistan a bit of a pass that we don't extend to others, right? And I think Pakistan has become incredibly, incredibly adept at manipulating that we're the lesser evil in the neighborhood. Those people just above us are much worse, so you should focus on them and don't pay us as much mind. And they do a great job of that, whether it's a Republican president or a Democratic president. And I therefore, and we'll come to this in some of the, I think, in the where the discussion is headed, it's one of the problems I have with what the future of American foreign policy is likely to be, not just under Biden, but in successive presidential administrations post-Biden, is the fact that we just stick to our traditionalism in the United States when it comes to foreign policy. It's very difficult to get new, innovative thinkers into foreign policy circles. It's very difficult to challenge old ideas because people just don't want to run that risk, right? They just don't want to be the person to stand out if it doesn't work. They wait for not just consensus, they wait for dominant consensus for ideas to change. And that causes a huge sort of glacial inertia in diplomacy in the United States, especially in conflict areas, which Afghanistan, Pakistan, that area, it's just for the United States and its foreign policy, that area is always going to be considered a conflict zone. The joke we've always had was like Afghanistan is so good at protecting its territory and so bad at governing its territory. We've always found that fascinating. Like, you can never defeat Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the only country that can defeat Afghanistan. And that is the case. Pakistan gets away with too much. If I can speak freely and openly, Pakistan manipulates the situation to get away with more with the United States because of the instability just above it, and it doesn't get called out enough on some of those maneuvers. And I don't anticipate a Biden team changing that at all, to be honest, if I can be frank. I don't think that's going to change in the next 4 years.
So basically, you want to say that the post-Cold War, thought process is still dragging on.
We miss it, Vipul. We want to somehow get us back to the Cold War. That's the comfort zone of America, is give us the Cold War.
The next question is for Sandeep. Sandeep, this was the only heliborne counter-terrorist operation in India up till date. And it brings images to our mind of what happened in Somalia during Clinton presidency. Two Black Hawk helicopters were shot down by RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, and about 19 Rangers, Special Forces, US Army Rangers, were lynched and their bodies were dragged. And that played into a very big media attention, and ultimately the Americans had to withdraw from it. When that operation was going on in a very such a congested place, were there any thoughts that the helicopter might be shot down through small arms fire?
It's actually how much time we have? Can we?
We have
We are on time. We are controlling time. See what it is not heli-borne operation. I used helicopter only to put my troops on top of that building. Now I wanted, actually, I was wishing that the militant come out and fire on the helicopter. You gave an example of Somalia. Somalia, they were going with the helicopter in a rebel-held territory. This is my country. I'm in control. The militants are, the terrorists are on that building. And there were three reasons where I asked for a helicopter asset and it was available to me. The first reason was to minimize the casualties. There was only one way to go up in that building. And that was also blasted off by the IEDs. The lift system was blasted off. Their only way, either we climb through pipes or we go through that only staircase, broken staircase. And prior to that, the militant has used one ID in that staircase, the explosive device, and one explosive device outside where the petrol pump is there. So I, in my appreciation, thought that there might be a third IED which will be waiting for us while we are going up on that one limited staircase. Number one. Second, they are on top. I don't know which floor they are. They are ready to receive us. It is me, I have to surprise them. And the fourth reason is that I wanted them to fire on the helicopter. The operation would have finished before my troops would have landed, because I would have killed them. I have covered all the places. So in the planning, you when you do the quick planning, you see all this, and when you are dead sure, you execute that plan. And I'm sure, and that's why they could not fire on the helicopter. Moment they never thought that helicopter is there and they are going to come out, and for firing on that helicopter, they have to come out from the building or from the window or from the door. So I've covered everything.
Okay, right. General Joshi, nowadays, not nowadays, maybe for the last 3-4 years, the lone wolf terrorism is coming up, especially in US and Europe. How much of a threat do individuals who are not formally connected to any terrorist groups are in India, are to India's security? And how such individuals can be stopped? We are coming to the gray area of radicalization, basically.
Yeah, this is a new kind of terrorism that we are witnessing since last 2-3 years, or last 2 years rather. You see, in Western world, the cost of individual life is very high, and they put it at a very high position. It gives a lot of coverage. Media is given, media gets involved, and a lot of emphasis is put on a human life. In our part of the world, in Asia, not only in India, in entire Asia, human life is not that important. I may be, I may not be sounding very good, but that's the fact of it. So that is why you see in India these kind of attacks are not happening. It is only happening in European countries and in US. Now coming on to how to stop. If we shut off the media coverage, Their aim is to get highlighted in the media and create panic in the masses. If we do not allow this to happen, their aim will not get achieved. Their aim is not to kill one or two people. Their aim is to highlight their cause. If we block this, we have achieved partly our aim. Second way of could be that all these people are highly radicalized, as you brought out in your question itself. They are radicalized, and how do they get radicalized? Today, it is by internet, social media, WhatsApp, Twitter, and these kind of communication ways and means. We must do good surveillance on these aspects, must track them on in the electronic media and stop such people getting radicalized. Second is community communicators, if I may use this word term. That means some sane people, some people who have voice in that community, they must speak to their people, all the person, young as well as old, and educate those people, try and put some sanity in their mind and make them understand that this is the place where we have to live peacefully and not by killing each other. These kind of things, if we do, that means we should de-radicalize people. And as I earlier brought out, that we have to stop the publicity aspect of it. And lastly, there must be fast action and fast judicial action to bring them, all these culprits, to book. Thank you.
Crosston, terrorists are using Twitter and Facebook for planning and propaganda, and these companies refuse to police the content. You know, FBI cannot get access to Apple phones. You must have seen from many of the terrorist attacks in the US. But if an individual promotes terrorism, he is arrested under national security laws. So, under your opinion, do we require terrorism laws for social companies?
It's a bit slippery, to be completely honest, in the legal sense of the word. I think we have, and piggybacking on what General Joshi just had mentioned, the reason terrorist groups can be, or I'll just say radical extremist groups can be so effective online is because they're appealing to sort of mental and emotional processes that it's sort of difficult to even define if it's even illegal, right? In the sense of formal law senses, like they're not recruiting people openly online in chat rooms to go blow things up or go kill people. It's a much more subtle process and a longer progressive process that's much more devious. So it's more about what alternative measures in the policing sense can we have with our data and our material that might try to make a positive impact. I've written about this in a previous article called Jihadi John's, shameless plug. But in Jihadi John's, we talked a lot about how we have an inordinate amount of data in our policing agencies on people that we track and we watch, social media wise, but we're doing it only to see if we have evidence after they do something bad, right? Like that's what we're using the data for, is we're not trying to use the data to think of any kind of positive policing measures that might intervene preemptively to stop radicalization or stop extremism before it takes place. And I think we could use the data in both ways. I think we can use it as evidence after the fact, but maybe we need to get a little more innovative with our data about how do we use it preemptively to try to stop extremism or radicalization happening beforehand. Right now, America is very bad at that, but the data is there. It's just whether we have the will to change the way we look at our policing options.
Sandeep, this is not a question to you, but this is something of kind of an open-ended framework. Do you want to share something from your experiences, from your days at NSG, or from your expertise, or something which is not shared outside with the outside world? Would you like to share something?
See, 2-3 things, because when you carry out such kind of operation, it becomes very close to your heart. When you revisit the complete process, where you see that you would have done that would have come better. A few things I still feel slightly, demoralized, because first thing, the reaction, the country country's reaction, when I say country, India's reaction to this kind of situation was pathetic. Pathetic in the sense, uh, we were ready in and ready to go, because like everybody else, we were also watching TV, and we were ready with equipped everybody. We are not sitting in our homes, and we are asking to headquarters, to everyone, okay, let us go, we want to go. And till 12:30 in the night, nobody is allowing you to go. When they allow you to go, and after that, when you reach at the airport and board the plane, you are waiting for the VIPs who wants to accompany you to the Bombay. Why that? They are not going to fight. They are not going to lead the operation. It is the strike force which is going. That is the priority, and that further delayed our reaction time. In meantime, they were killing people, children, ladies, everybody. This is as far as India's perspective, India's is concerned as a country. We don't have sense of urgency. We don't have mechanism to, okay, because the people who are sitting there at decision making table, they don't have exposure to how the special forces operate. They are the desk job people. They don't know. They don't have any sense how to deploy forces. What is the time frame required? What are the assets required? Because they have not done any exposure with the NSG. And forces like us, like 12 years back, we had an operation. There is no operation till now. Again that thing would have set in. Initially, everybody will say, okay, we will fit in, we will tighten up screws here and there, but the people move on, and again the lethargy sets in. Number one. Number two, I was amazed. More than 23 countries, their nationals were killed mercilessly in this operation. The the front runner when counterinsurgency all over the world, Israelis' assets were targeted, dovetailed in beautifully by Lashkar-e-Taiba. Lashkar-e-Taiba is nothing but is a ground soldier of ISI. Everybody knows this. Headley has told you. You have put in Headley inside jail because of this. Kasab has told you. You have evidence. You have witnesses. What else a court of law requires? But neither Israelis have taken it that seriously the way they have taken Black September, nor Americans have taken it because of their relation and Afghan policy with Pakistan. Who is Lashkar-e-Taiba? It is Pakistan which has done it. The Pakistan has killed 16 national of the 16 country in India, and injured at further 7 countries people of 7 countries. What those countries have done? Have they punished Pakistan? Why not? So everybody, when this is a very big question, if they wanted to attack India, it's okay. They would have killed in CST. Why they went to Chabad house? That is a question everybody should ponder upon.
And one again pertinent point was the strategic culture about the bureaucracy in India, which does not know what goes on outside. They just sit in their offices and on the benches. I think they should be, all the pen pushers in the bureaucracy should be attached to the special forces for maybe 3 months with the para SF and NSG.
Yeah.
And they should send in areas of counterinsurgency and counterterrorism such as Northeast and Kashmir. They should be put on
On
the
a regular basis. On a regular basis.
Yes.
Accountability must be there, which there's no accountability for certain people.
Right. Vipul, in very short, I'll give you 2 minutes. What are the measures taken by India to factor in global strategic alliances for preventing counter-terrorist financing from an economic and industry standpoint? 2 minutes. Quick.
So basically, okay. So with reference to America, so we have all the MLAT in place. MLAT is your Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty in place, and we have all the exchanging of incriminating evidence act. We have criminal extraditions and everything happening. the entire network is now, sharing the unclassified biographic information of, known and suspected terrorists and whatever is coming real time, as a reporting mechanism. We have, information exchange, set up with terrorist screening centers, with US, and then, CBI, CID, with our enforcement directorate, doing a shake hand with FBI and CIA for that matters, and on India gearing up for the combating of financial terrorism on international level. We have a mechanism, the ecosystem set by RBI, by SEBI, boiling down to SEBI, IRDA. We have Prevention of Money Laundering Act, in place since 2002. We have financial intelligence units are working in tandem with Ministry of Finance and Enforcement Directorate. We are a part of FATF since 2010, and a significant part of FSRBs like APG and EAG. We are following, there is a global handshake in terms of vigilance and reporting. We are, following BCBS. We are following Egmont Group Financial Intelligence Unit guidelines. We are following Wolfberg Group guidelines for banking governance and everything. So yeah, so these are the steps. In short, I can say that we are gearing up and we are coming up to this thing, and we are there. We are there.
Crosston, this is the last question for the panel discussion. State sponsors of terrorism are on UN counter-terrorism committees. We have Pakistan, then we have Saudi Arabia on UN HRC committees. So what is the option? Should we have a different organizations on the lines of United Nations led by liberal democracy? Or is it going to divide the whole world between the liberals and the authoritarian?
I sort of have it's like good news, bad news situation, in the sense that the ability of truly international organizations to create and enforce international law, I've always been in the skeptics camp for that, I must admit. And one of the reasons for that is what you've just explained, of how we have, say, obvious state sponsors of terrorism on the counterterrorism committees of major international organizations, where they're clearly running interference rather than trying to enforce new rules that actually can become followed and observed by the entire world. However, if we really think about it, the global war on terror, in a certain way, was the very thing you were just talking about. It was the quote-unquote civilized, stable, democratic nations of the world coming together and saying, we will, if we have to, by force, stop these types of behaviors and actions, and we won't necessarily go through the formal international organization channels. We would prefer it. It's sort of the classic American style leadership, which is, we would love to have a coalition, we would love to have partners, but that partnership is we're going to do what we're going to do anyway. So we just want you to be on board. We'd like to have that. And in terms of terrorism and counterterrorism efforts, that seems to be the only working plan, is that in the end, if we really do see imminent threat to us or other allied nations like India, we reserve the right to act, whether it's officially approved by international organizations or not, because those efforts actually show that the IOs are suspect, right? Of course, the IO will not vote for it if they have Libya, Iran, and Syria back in the day obviously voting against any such initiatives, because it's in their self-interest to not act and not allow other actions to take place. So the bad news is that international law probably never really will help us. The good news is international law doesn't need to help us, perhaps.
It's in the George Bush's term, the coalition of the willing. Yeah, that wraps up the panel discussion. It was very good. That's such a wide panel of experts was speaking on the topic. I think everybody must have got the knowledge of your backgrounds, which is not available in the open sources, such as books and televisions and documentaries. Thank you very much. We'll wrap the session.